You're listening to the Arts Unknown podcast. I'm your host, Jared Rocco. This episode of The Arts Unknown is sponsored by Creative Peaks. Creative Peaks is working to redefine the artist profession and build more opportunities for artists around the world. Creative Peaks provides dynamic training, support, and mentorship to aspiring creative educators and artists. They work to introduce stronger values through the arts, creating more diverse opportunities for artists all around the world. Creative Peaks. Inspire the creative spirit. On today's episode, I got a chance to chat with Tony Rizzotto. Tony is the co-founder, president, and CEO of the company Creative Peaks. He is also an accomplished guitarist, graduating from the Berklee College of Music in Boston, and has spent over a decade as a music educator for guitar. I had a great time getting to talk with Tony about his company, music education, and how unlikely it was that he ever ended up picking up the guitar in the first place. Let's take a listen. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Thanks for having me.
So I got a lot of different questions for you today.
Sure.
I'm really curious to know about a lot of things. So we're going to start with you and the beginning.
Which beginning?
Which beginning? There's a lot of beginnings. Your beginning, actually, maybe even before you started playing guitar, I'm not sure, but I wanted to know what your memories were of arts-based classes going back to, let's say, starting in elementary school, whether that's music classes, visual arts, I don't know, maybe dance or something, anything arts-based from an early age.
Basically non-existent.
Really?
Well,
where did you grow up? Let's start with that. Where were you in elementary school?
I grew up in rural New York, eventually moved to what became a very tourist place in New Jersey eventually.
Okay.
And arts was not a big part of my early childhood, like elementary. Mm-hmm. I know there was music class, and it was basically just, singing, and everybody knows singing like third grade.
Right. So you had general
concert.
Music.
Yeah, but it wasn't training or anything like that. It was just kind of, we're going to do this,
right.
Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my experience, I think, all the way through
middle school,
high school. No, once high school happened, that's when I started to get serious in music. But all the way through about 7th grade, I think it's probably just nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were you a music fan when you were a little kid? Did you listen to any music at all?
Yeah.
Did
my
you grow
mom
up in a
always had
musical
music
household?
on. There were no musicians in my family before me.
Okay.
My grandmother did teach piano a little bit, but she was not formally trained.
Really?
She's one of those people who had a really great ear. But
That's
never
pretty
actually.
Interesting.
I was just told this. I've never actually witnessed her playing piano in all the years that she was around me.
That's pretty unusual too for piano to be self-taught and teaching, because like guitar, that's a pretty common thing.
Well, that's how I am. I'm self-taught.
Really?
I didn't have any teachers. There were no music schools, or there was no music store.
Right. There's nowhere you could really go.
There was nowhere where I could go. And I think probably before I went to college, I had to search for a teacher to write me a recommendation.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, because you needed one to get into school.
Sure.
And, up until that point, I mean, the first 8 years of my playing career, quote unquote, was just learning through books and listening to music. There was really no internet, or I'm only 35.
Right. I was gonna say I don't want to age you, but I guess you just did that. So what years are we talking here when you were getting into
I guess that was probably 99.
Okay.
2000.
So there was the internet, but it was a baby.
Yeah, we didn't really have it. We didn't use it that much. We didn't know what to do with it.
Right. It wasn't as useful as it is today.
Yeah. So it was a lot of library books and those types of things.
Wow. What a concept. You don't think about that today, right?
No, not at all. I guess I do, but not a lot of people do, I guess.
Right. Yeah. The kids of today.
Yeah.
Interesting. So do you remember what that felt like? Okay, like I want to learn guitar.
It was fun. I figured that was just how everybody learned. I mean,
Did you have any musician friends? Any other buddies that played?
Guys, they learned the same exact way I did. I mean,
really?
It was no different. I played in a couple of bands, how it goes in high school.
Oh, yeah.
But it was, the same thing. I mean, they were self-taught. There was this one guy, Keith, in our band. He had lessons, but his parents could afford them. They were very expensive, I think.
So that was that one of the issues where it was just a price thing and your parents didn't want to
I think with my
pay for it?
parents, if they end up listening to this, they'll probably tell me, no, that wasn't it. But I
Yeah.
think it was more so the stigma of like, you want to be in a rock band, you
Oh,
want to play
okay.
rock and roll.
So is that what drew you to music?
I can't lie and say yes. I don't think that was it. I think it was just, it made me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all I ever cared about.
What
you know?
drew you to the guitar initially, even before you learned how to play?
Geez, I just looked cool. It's the same thing.
That's
My
valid.
students say to me, it just looked cool. It had a lot of colors.
Mm-hmm.
Piano was like black and brown, and it was loud.
Boring.
Oh no.
No.
Yes.
I'm talking to younger Tony right now.
As a 10-year-old, it was not as interesting as guitar, where just the people who played guitar looked really cool.
Like who? Give me some examples of people that inspired you.
I mean, it's all the cliche ones: Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck was my biggest influence,
Oh, okay.
hands down, musically for a
Yeah.
long time. Metallica was a part of my life for that formative years of
Sure.
like 12 through 16.
Those are
And then
important
after that, I
years.
started branching out into other styles of music. I got really into Motown and Stax
okay.
specifically. That Stax era of recordings, R&B, really gritty type of, very funky music. And
Yeah, I was gonna say funk too.
yeah, but not so much like the traditional not traditional, but just the sort of virtuosic funk music. I always use the word virtuosic with the funk music because
Yeah,
it
I don't hear that term too much.
Yeah, it's so hard to do right. You
Yeah.
really have to be a very practical technician to pull that off. And that was not me. And I learned from books.
Wow.
I didn't learn how to do all that stuff, and I didn't even learn how to play with a pick.
Really? You learned fingerstyle?
Yeah, I always play with
Interesting.
my hands because that's just.
That's what you had?
Yeah, I mean, I knew what a guitar pick was, obviously,
Okay.
but none of the books I ever had ever instructed on what to do with a pick. It was just something that people use, and
Interesting.
by the time I had met people who played guitar, I had already done it this
Right,
way.
right. That's the way you're
and
used to
I
it.
thought I was really good at it, so I'm just going to keep doing it.
Interesting. Okay, so how old were you when you picked up the guitar?
I think 10.
10? Okay.
Oh, no, sorry. 12?
12?
Yeah.
The tween years, we'll say? Not quite a teenager?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did your parents have a guitar? Did you have to go out and
Oh,
buy
God,
one?
no. Jeez.
What was that like?
I think I had asked for a guitar for a whole year. I thought of
Okay.
myself as a guitarist, I think, before I actually owned a guitar.
Wow. Okay. So it was just in your
yeah,
blood. You knew.
Again, there was no, you
Like
couldn't-
no other instruments appealed to you. You didn't want to try bands.
Well, I
or
didn't know too many, and I didn't want to try band just because I didn't
look
like
cool.
a lot of the people in the band.
I see. It was a personal issue.
Maybe they didn't like me. It's
Yeah.
easy now.
I see.
But finding a guitar was difficult because there were no music stores, right? Like I said, we had what was it? I think it was J.C. Penney used to mail catalogs.
Oh yeah,
It was J.C. Penney, and
they sold guitars?
They had like a half a page for guitars, and I remember as a
Wow.
kid, my parents would tell you I had the page bookmarked in the
Really?
in the
Oh my
catalog,
god! You
and
were
I'd
serious.
look at it, and I looked at that picture for a long time. And
Remember what brand?
It was a Washburn.
A Washburn,
Yeah,
okay.
D11. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But we still have it. That guitar.
That was my
super
next
rare.
question. Do you still have that? It's still
Well, my
kicking
parents
around?
keep it in their house.
Okay.
I think because
Sentimental value.
Nah.
No?
I think they just don't want to throw it away in hopes that I might get famous one day.
Oh, I see. So they're banking on
But
that.
it was a horrible guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did you have that for?
Geez, probably about 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that got you through that first initial hump of learning.
Oh
and
yeah.
playing
I the first few years not really that much,
Mm-hmm.
but after I met some people around high school, oh yeah, I got a lot out of it.
Mhm. How much do you think it cost back in the day?
Oh, it was it was $199.
$199.
Yeah, with the guitar and the case, and then it came with a capo.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty good deal. And
I didn't know what to do with the capo.
You never read that in any of your books at the library?
No, I mean,
Like glossed over that?
No.
That's too funny.
It was funny. The library book, I couldn't even tell you what it was called because it didn't have a cover.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. That
Sounds weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Well, it's
sounds
such an
weird. It's the truth.
uncommon thing, I feel like, now to hear like a young kid be like, yeah, I went to the library and I looked up a book on how to play guitar because there were no stores or, obviously the internet now. And it sounds like you got a very unique story there, just being brought up with that and the way you found music. Because it sounds like a lot of ways the odds were stacked against you. You weren't able to find a music store. Your parents didn't want to do lessons. Like, it's kind of amazing that you ended up as a guitarist and a guitar teacher.
Yeah.
After all that,
I think part of where that came from was, one, I just wanted to do it. That was just the way that it was.
Right. And you were
I have
determined
to do it at some point. But I think I recognized really early on. I was, I like to think of myself as creative, but I was very practical about it. There was not a lot of opportunity to make money doing it.
Right.
So as much as I liked it, I never understood how I could monetize that skill. I think at that point, I'm talking, 18 or 19. I think probably 17 or 18 is probably more accurate. But it was just kind of a fun thing. But then, you're thinking about college and what am I going to do with my life and all that. And I ended up getting a business degree, an associate's in business, because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
So you didn't go for music right away after high school?
No, okay. I went straight to the community college, and I did very well in school. I did fine. It was semi-interesting to me anyway, this idea of, business and how to run and the...
Well, especially if you're a practical person, too. If you're thinking like that to begin with,
I saw it as a skill
that,
was useful. I just didn't know what I could apply it to, And I had temporary not temp jobs, but just short-term jobs where, I was kind of using those things, but it was very unclear where that was going to go for me.
Right.
And then I think...
Did you have a game plan? Like when you're getting this business degree? And...
No. Okay. Truth be told, I graduated high school in 2002.
Okay.
There was not a whole lot, and maybe this sounds bad on my high school. I won't mention it, but it was true. There wasn't a lot of conversation on like, what are you going to do after high school?
Really? No guidance counselors or anything like that?
No, we had guidance counselors, and there were certainly people saying like, take the SATs, go to college, that type of thing.
But that was a very generic kind of advice.
It wasn't pushed on you. And truth be told, a lot of people I went to high school with, I don't think went to college. And maybe that's my town. Okay. I don't really know.
Sure, it could be
but
location.
It was not something that was kind of pushed on me.
Right.
I kind of wanted to do it because I thought, well, that's what a lot of people are doing now, so I'm going to go to college.
Right, exactly.
Man, another thing that makes me feel old. It was only 2002.
Oh, I know. Sorry, man.
It's okay.
You're adding the dates here, by the way. I'm not asking you for specifics.
No.
You're filling in the blanks.
My own vanity.
Yeah. So good. Hey, get it out there, you know. One of the questions I was going to ask was, what was your experience as a music student like? But you never really had that experience.
Not till I went to college. For music,
Right. So let's dive into that a little bit. So you went to college at first after high school for business. Was that a bachelor's, associate's?
No, it was associate's.
Okay, so 2 years. All right, you get out of associates, you got a degree in business, right? What then? What next?
I had a job working at, ironically, was underwriting mortgages.
Okay.
And,
not the most creative or musical thing, but
no, it was a very boring job. No, it didn't really pay any bills. It wasn't good, and the commute was long. And I lived in New Jersey, and anybody who's listening to this from New Jersey might know that commuting up and down the Garden State Turnpike
sounds fun.
Is not fun at all. No. And then the worst option was taking the Parkway.
Oh God!
So it was not a fun job, and I ended up getting laid off.
Really?
Which was, that
stinks. How long were you there for before that happened?
Oh, I think probably a couple of years. But getting laid off was different from being fired because they couldn't keep my job, and I remember,
money issue. Or expenses.
It was just like a thing where, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm going to get laid off from every job I'm going to. So I applied to music school because that was the thing that was kind of keeping me sort of grounded, I think, through this business stuff. I thought, well, it's the only other thing I'm good at, so I'm going to apply. I didn't know of any music schools except Juilliard,
right?
Because I knew somebody in school that went there, and I wasn't that talented, so I wasn't gonna go there. Right. So at that point, it was just the internet. Type it in, and Berklee College of Music popped up, and you didn't need to audition. You just filled out the application.
Really?
No, I didn't.
Oh my God! What was this? 2002? You said?
No, Berklee. I graduated 2002 from high school. Associates took me to 2004. So Berklee, I applied early 2005, and I eventually went there.
No audition required.
No audition, no. It's just I was very lucky because my next door neighbor he used to be a drummer in a rock band in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
And he had some experience. He never really passed anything down to me. It wasn't one of those. He didn't want to talk about it. You know, they were a really successful band. I won't name what they are, but they were very, very successful. And he was kind of burnt out from the whole idea, and he tried to talk me out of it.
Really, he's probably bitter.
Yeah, he's like, you don't want to do that. You know, there's not a lot of money in it, and you know, the creativity it only goes so far. You know,
yeah.
I was told that before I even filled out the application, but I was like, nah, screw it, I'm gonna do it anyway.
Wow, so that didn't turn you away.
No, I mean, I'm a pretty stubborn person.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm noticing a theme here. Like you were in an environment where there was no music schools and you know no internet to look up or anything, and then you still ended up getting a guitar, and then you get this guy who's from a famous rock band. It's like, yeah, man, it's not worth it. You're like, whatever, I'm gonna do it anyways.
And you know, now, I hadn't thought about that in a long time. Now that I think about it, you know, as like a 19-year-old kid who sort of had hazy dreams of maybe getting famous. I don't want to say that was something I thought about a lot.
It's an interesting way to describe it. Hazy dreams.
Yeah, I don't think
like
I ever thought I had it in me to be famous.
Yeah.
That was not interesting to me
right.
anyway. But I wanted to be good at the guitar, and my neighbor, you know, he was still active in sort of like the music recording, and he did a lot of video work and that type of stuff. And eventually, before I applied, it became into he was making films, and he was doing pretty good at it. And he was making like music films, so documentaries on like different bands from the 80s and people he worked with, you know, trying to give them their dues, I think.
Right, tell their story.
And I got to meet a lot of, you know, interesting people, you know, not many that had interesting stories, but they had interesting perspectives on just being creative people, you know, especially guys who you play in punk bands, and sort of my impression of punk bands was that they were just noisemakers who you know, didn't want to take things seriously, and that was really not the case. There were a lot of insightful creative people, you know, that I met in those years, and that probably had something to do with it, because I do remember that being sort of I thought that was cool. You know? That's like, oh man, I'm meeting these people who actually like succeeded playing this instrument.
Right.
You know, what does that even mean, playing the guitar? You know?
Right. And what does being successful mean as a musician or a creative too?
Oh, I still don't even know that.
Right. Yeah.
I think you're still looking for that, you know.
Sure.
You know,
it's a hard thing to define, you know.
It's getting less hard. I think it's just kind of
I guess successful would be financially stable, and then I guess the other side of that is happy.
Yeah,
mentally stable.
Don't get me wrong, I've managed to find those things, you know, being an artist, but you know, it's not easy. But at least back then, that wasn't the concern. It was just like, this is what makes me happy, I'm gonna do it.
Right.
You know. So anyway, my neighbor and another guy I had known wrote me a letter of recommendation. And I got into college.
So you didn't need an audition, but you needed a recommendation.
Yeah.
For Berklee.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm fairly certain that the recommendations might have been a little bit fibbed.
Uh-oh. We don't have to go into detail about that.
Maybe we shouldn't talk about that.
Yeah.
But either way, I got in, and you know, it was one of those things that was the best thing that ever happened, and it ended up being one of the worst things that ever happened.
Really?
And then it turned into the best thing that ever happened again.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's quite the roller coaster there.
It really is. Yeah.
And that was 4 years at Berklee? That was the bachelor's?
No, I had transferred in. I was there for literally a couple days over 2 years. I mean, I started and I did not stop. I just, and that's what a lot of people did. You know, you'd go in, you'd just take 3 semesters a year until you finish.
Wow.
Yeah.
3 semesters a year. Was that over the summer you take classes too?
You take classes in the summer. You know?
January term sometimes.
Boston was expensive, man.
Right.
You know, I don't want to be here for 4 years.
Right,
I don't want to be here for 2 years.
Right.
You know, I ended up staying for 15 years. But at the time, I was like, I don't want to stay here. You know, I want to just do my thing and then go.
What was the plan after that? Go back to New Jersey, New York area?
At first, yeah. You know, but like I said, when I got there, I was just grinding, and I met a lot of people who did what I did.
I'm sure you met a lot of other creatives. Maybe for the first time in your life, that many creative musicians in one area.
That's really what Berklee is, though. It's sort of this place where And now this is what their advertising is all about in the marketing. It's like you can come and meet people who are just like you. And there was a little bit of that maybe when I went, but more so it was the sort of the opportunity to learn from these great musicians. And there are a lot of good musicians over there. And it just became this sort of culture, the community that, has taken me a long ways. But I don't think we realized what we were getting into back then.
Sure. Well, what was you said it was the greatest thing and then it was the worst thing.
Yeah, it was great because it gave me this sort of appreciation for, what I do and what other people do, in the sort of music field, Okay. I had no clue what music skill really was until I was, 22, 23 years old, and that was the best thing for me because I realized how hard some people had to work. And, I truthfully had gotten a lot of things by not necessarily working that hard. So it made me think.
In what way? How did that happen?
I don't know. I think it was just,
was luck?
Some people really were working hard to just get by. And that's not, I'm not saying that as a negative thing. I'm saying some people really had to work to get through because the type of learning that you had to do there was not really compatible with the way that they learned things. And I think anybody who went there listening to this will go, yeah. It wasn't the right way to learn. It works for
some people and it doesn't work for other people.
And it really worked for me because it allowed me to just stay focused on doing this, you know, and that's sort of how my mind is. It's like, I'm most creative and I'm most productive when I'm just focused on this one task or two tasks.
Is the curriculum, not that you have to go into crazy detail, but it was very like tunnel vision, like you have to kind of have that?
I don't think the curriculum was like that. It was sort of the atmosphere was like that.
Oh, so more the culture and the vibe around. It was
competitive,
campus.
But it was very supportive back then. Now I think it's there's probably still some support. I mean, it's still around there a little bit, but it's way different now.
I'm sure.
Yeah. But at least then it was, we're all working hard because we want to get really good at this. Right. And
that's probably inspiring to be around that many people all really doing that all at the same time and working together, collaborating.
The saying of like your college friends are your best friends for life. I mean, that's totally true. I met some people there who
I
still talk to, weekly now. I mean, we live thousands of miles apart, and there was just something about those 2 years there where, you really made these artistic connections, right? That morphed into like professional connections, that morphed into personal connections,
lifelong friendships.
Yeah. And that's great. They all do different things, but it was at that point it was the best thing that ever happened because one, I wanted to do it, sure, and I was successful at it. I got to do it, right? But it led me down this whole other path. It's like I can get really good at this, and I can be good at this, and I still hadn't figured out if I could make money. Right.
Working on it. Still work in progress.
Yeah, I was still working on it at that point. But, I had always worked at that point. And by the time I had graduated Berklee, I was lucky enough to get a job. I worked at
what did you do?
I worked at a instrument repair shop in the we'll call it the bowels of the 150 building. Okay.
Berklee grads will know where that is, I assume.
Oh, yeah. They'll know. It was all the way back by Music Synth.
Okay.
And
this is guitar repairs.
It was like instrument repairs. I knew a lot about electronics just because part of my upbringing was resistant to being a musician, so I learned a lot of different skills. And, my family was very hands-on, so everything we had to do ourselves. So, right. So I knew a lot about fixing things. I just had a sort of idea about.
You had the
looking
mindset
at something
to look at it,
and sort of figuring out what the issue is, and then tinkering. I was a tinkerer. Yeah, I think as a kid, my parents will tell you that's probably accurate. Yeah,
messing with stuff.
Once I built the Lego, castle,
that's how it starts.
Let's take it apart and see if we can make it different. And it was always playing with things like that, and it was a good fit because I was still working in music. Obviously, I cared a lot about my instrument, and this allowed me to do that, and I learned a lot of things that probably aren't useful to a lot of people, but you get a lot of perspective doing something like that because you realize that, at least I realized that what I did up to that point was only a part of what makes this sort of community work. Right. repairing your instruments is so important to a musician, because buying a new instrument is...
forget about it. Not usually in the cards, unless your parents are rich.
No, and there was a lot of that. There's a lot of people who are like, just buy a new one. No big deal. But
you weren't cut from that cloth.
No, most people weren't. And you're attached to your instrument. I mean, I'm just gonna throw this away and get another one.
Definitely not.
But
and the perspective that you were talking about before also probably came from meeting all new people from different walks of life, right?
Yeah. So this was 2007, late 2007, right? So after my first year, I started working full time, and I was going to school full time.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Was working full time in the shop?
Mm-hmm.
Really? They gave you full time hours?
Yeah, they needed it. That was it was small. It was 3 people. Still is.
Really?
Oh
my God.
Yeah. And
that's almost surprising.
I worked full time, and then because Berklee, most of the stuff was at night. All the recording and ensembles, rehearsal, everything was at night. So I would work during the day, take some classes before dinner,
right, and
then do my ensembles and everything at night, and then I get like 4 hours of sleep and then repeat.
Oh my God.
That's kind of what you did back then, nobody slept a lot.
Yeah.
We weren't partiers. That's the other thing too. Berklee was not
no crazy college party stories.
Well, I think I have zero.
Yeah.
I mean, we went out once a month.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, for sure, once a month.
Yeah.
I don't think there were many months where we went out twice, because we were all just doing different things, and maybe that was just my clique of people. But more so, it's like I look at those schedules. Actually, because we're packing up this house here, I dug through sort of the bottom of these drawers, and I found one of my old schedules. And
wow!
Like, I can't believe that I did that. I think I have a lot of energy now. I don't know how I did that.
Yeah.
No. There's no way I could
10
do
years
that
younger, that's how.
Oh my God. Well, full time was taking 14 credits.
Wow.
I don't even remember how many hours that was. Probably like 6 hours a day. So I was like,
and ensembles too are work because you got to practice, you got to learn stuff. It's not like a regular college course where you go in and maybe you have some homework. It's like, you got to practice. God knows.
See, that was something that I don't think a lot of people understood, like who were non-musicians. They go, well, isn't that just like studying? It's like, no.
Right. Or isn't it fun because it's music and you want to do it?
But you're working, you're learning the part. But then if you want to understand the part, you got to study.
Right.
So you got to take the class, you got to study, you got to learn the part, and then you got to rehearse it. It's like you're doing those 4 things.
Right. It's a lot of work.
One class, and then I had 3 ensembles a semester.
Oh my God.
It was 3. A couple of labs where like technical labs where you're learning things. So you have to practice with those. It's like the only time I didn't have a guitar in my hand was when I was sleeping. You know, and even at work, I had a guitar in my hand.
Right, I was going to say, even when you're at your job.
So it's like I got my 10,000 hours? I got the 10,000 hours at college very fast.
In 2 years, more or less.
Yeah, I don't know, but it was very crazy. Early on. But everybody did that. It wasn't just me. That's just part of the culture, and that was good because it gave us this sort of idea, this work ethic of how things were to get done. And then
and having everyone else around you working that hard too was probably inspiring to see that.
Oh yeah, I mean,
did you push each other? Were you competitive?
Without a doubt. I mean, certain friends more than others. I mean, the ones that pushed me the most. I mean, those are the ones we talk weekly, and we're still very part of each other's lives.
Or girls.
Yeah. But that was when it was the best part, and then I graduated 2008. Then there was an economic recession, and then the music business.
Talk about timing.
The music business started changing. All of a sudden, record companies going away, and clubs started closing, and you couldn't perform anymore. And that was not
a terrifying time to be creative.
That was the worst. 2008, 9. Those were the worst years, I think, to be a graduated musician, artist, whatever you want to call it. Like I do.
Yeah.
And I just remember it was really hard to find a gig, so I did the only thing I'd ever done, and a bunch of us did. And we just started our own band. We tried to make a business out of it. It was a general business, functions, and so
that's a great benefit of going to a place with a lot of other creatives and keeping in touch with those people. It was
very efficient for what we did because. I had that business experience. I knew how to run the books a little bit.
Right.
I'd never done it, but it was something that I got used to, you know. And we were a very professional band, It was something that, looking back on, you change a lot of things. But then at the time, it's like, man, we were doing pretty well, yeah. And
how long was the band together for?
So the original band, not that long. I had a hard time finding good bass players.
I see. Attention bass players.
Yeah.
A little bit too late, I guess, but
too late, But the band was called Be Sweet, and we were a good band, and everybody in that band went on to do something really, really special.
Nice. How many people in the band?
It was always a 5-piece, only a couple.
Okay.
We didn't dabble with horns too much, but our thing was, we were the original cover band. That was our thing.
Okay.
So,
explain.
So we played covers because that's the general business thing. People just want to hear pop music.
Right.
But we played a lot of it in our own sort of arrangement style. So that's really what I did. Playing the music was easy for us then.
Right.
Majority of us could just listen to the song and
figure it
play
out.
it. We were really good that way. At least our drummer even too had phenomenal ears. Which is hard to find.
Especially in drummers, yeah.
Yeah. No drum jokes.
Yeah, no drum jokes.
Yeah.
We said that before we started the podcast, no drum jokes.
And that was easy, but that wasn't challenging. We did that for a little while and it was like not that fun. So
well, what about the business side of it? I mean, couldn't you argue it doesn't matter if it's
that
challenging if
focus.
the business and you're making money?
Yeah, that was all we were concerned about, making money. I mean, it was a hard education of making money, paying people, paying taxes.
But I guess my point being expenses. Like, why would you worry about it being like challenging if it's like you're talking musically?
It wasn't musically challenging,
right?
So,
but again, some people would argue, well, who cares? You're making money, you're playing music.
That was a majority of people, but that was not this band. I mean,
interesting.
We didn't. We had I remember very early on, maybe the first year, we had a conversation. Everyone just sort of poured their hearts out about how bad it was going.
Meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
is that when the band broke up?
It was just no. It was just kind of decided. We like the music. We want to do something interesting for ourselves. So we started arranging music the way that we would want to play it. So taking popular music and playing it in a reggae, or taking a really popular song and putting it to some weird rock beat or something.
Right,
like
a style that's foreign
something that
to
was still accessible
style.
to people. They could still dance to it. They would
still recognize the song.
They would recognize the song and then hopefully appreciate the sort of creative approach to playing it. It worked out pretty good. I mean,
what was the response like from the audience?
Responses were always good.
Yeah,
that's the one thing I can say. Knock on wood. I'm knocking on my head for anybody who cares. But this was the best band I was ever in. We sounded good. Everything about it was just good. Wow. And I was never in another band like that afterwards.
How long were you guys together for?
On a professional basis, probably about 4 years, but on a personal level, probably about 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah, we had played together
between those two.
We played together in college, informally for ensembles and things like that. We lived. Everybody in my band, we lived on the same floor. In the dorm room.
That helps, man. I feel like that's how bands get started. Usually, just proximity.
There was a lot of rehearsing done in just the hallway or in our dorm rooms. And that's why I'm saying we just kind of clicked that way because most of those rehearsals were just goofing around.
Sure.
So
so it wasn't a serious. We're gonna get gigs and make money. It's just like getting to know everyone, getting to know how everyone plays.
Yeah. So we already had that. There was none of that. Getting to know people and what they sound like.
Well, that's important.
Eventually, bass players started leaving and had a hard time finding a bass player that did what our original bass player did. That's what we were always looking for, and that was our fault. But we never found anybody who was willing to commit. It just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah,
it just kind of fizzled out. I mean, that point, it was probably like 2009, 2010. We've been doing it a few years, and
did you do gigs around the Boston area? Did you ever branch out at all?
Yeah, not like clubs or anything like that. There weren't that many clubs to play at. They all started closing down probably like 2009.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of weddings, general business bands. We had a couple of agents. We had we did a lot of weddings and that type of thing, you know. And they were good. I mean, you learn a lot. And we were young.
Sure.
Younger.
Yeah.
So there was a lot to learn from that. But I think ultimately we stopped doing it because it was just a lifestyle that, wasn't really compatible. We were working the band and we made decent money, but then we learned after the first few years, well, that money doesn't really mean anything once you start paying your expenses and then taxes and, they don't truly...
It's not as much as you think it is? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. The number always looks good for whatever is, but then... you have to claim something on your taxes.
Right.
You know.
So you learned about that too.
Yeah, we got
you
a
can't
hard
just run away
lesson.
with all this money. And
exactly.
IRS is going to come find you.
You can get into trouble doing that. For anybody listening,
Good to
I
know.
can give you their numbers.
Yeah.
But luckily that wasn't us. It wasn't too bad. You know, we never got into any trouble or anything like that. It's just
That's good.
You're learning this stuff as like a 25-year-old person, and you're like, wow, okay, so
This is how the real world
this is how
works.
it really works. This is not what they told me it was going to be. In
So
school.
you didn't really get any sort of instruction like that when you were at school?
No, I mean, I took some business classes. Granted, I didn't take. That was not my trajectory in school.
Although you had a business major, so you could
Yes,
argue that was
but that was
smart
not
choice.
music business focused, and at that point, I thought it was different. You know,
You thought the music business was different than business.
At that point, I had not made the connection that
Interesting.
that
Okay.
this was, you know, it could have been the same thing, or
Right.
it is the same thing. It's just the way you think about it. So at that point, we kind of just decided the lifestyle's not good, the pay's not as good as we think. We can't really get any more money because now there's more bands doing things, and
Right.
they're charging less money, and
Right. That's
you
tough.
know, yeah. So
Oversaturated market.
Yeah, so we eventually just walked away, and it was again that same thing where, you know, what am I going to do with my life, that type of thing.
Sure.
And then I just decided to apply for jobs. I thought, well, I'll just start teaching. You know, this 2000.
It's a pretty common choice for a lot of music graduates, right? Besides gigging, I feel like the next thing most people do is teach.
It is a unconventional, or not unconventional is not the right word.
So I feel like it's pretty popular.
It's more of it's a popular unpopular choice.
All right, what do you mean by that?
Most people don't want to do it. They look at it as at least the people that I associated with. They were like, well, I don't really want to teach. It's not really something I want to do. I just do it for money.
Right.
I just show them some things, and then that's it. And
Yeah.
I always thought that was like a piss poor attitude.
Sure.
It's like, well, if you want to do something, don't you want to do it good?
Right.
And
that seems like that's the attitude you more or less had your whole life with everything.
yeah,
If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right.
Yeah, I'm going to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
But, musicians wanted to play. Artists wanted to create. And there was nothing that you could really create at that point that I knew of while teaching. So it was this sort of thing where people were charging $20 an hour or $25 an hour to teach a lesson. Right. And you couldn't make any money doing it anyway, but you couldn't make any more money than that, so you were kind of just stuck doing it. And I was really lucky. I didn't have any real experience at that point teaching, but I got hired at a school district to teach like after school music.
Okay.
And I tell you, that was a master class on teaching right there. Just
really,
my first teaching job was seeing how the school runs their sort of academic schedules and scheduling.
So you weren't the music teacher, like
no, it was like
an
after school music program,
adjunct.
It's just like an after school music program. And they basically gave me a crash course in how to communicate with people and schedule things. And here you go. And then all of a sudden, I'm calling people that don't even know me to schedule them for lessons. And
I was going to say, are these group classes or private lessons?
They were private lessons.
Okay.
Yeah, luckily I couldn't have handled a group back then. But yeah, it was good. I did it for a couple of years, and I really enjoyed it. I got to teach a lot of kids, and I sort of learned, what the school systems were doing at the time. Where I was working in Massachusetts. There were a lot of towns around in the greater Boston area. All of them really close to each other. And every school district did something different. And, I got to go around to these districts and teach music and just kind of see what other people did,
Right.
And yeah, it was really good. But ultimately, it just kind of boiled into this thing where I really liked it. I thought I was really good at it.
So you started to enjoy it after a while.
No, I always enjoyed it. I thought it was fun.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah,
it wasn't you were reluctant to start teaching, and then you found out you liked it.
I was reluctant to apply.
Okay.
Because of just what other people have told me.
Right.
But then I applied at really like the first probably couple of jobs that I saw. I'm pretty sure I found this job on Craigslist. Pretty sure.
There you go.
And yeah, I'm almost positive. And
from humble beginnings.
Yeah. I don't think you can do that anymore.
Especially for a teaching gig.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds sketchy.
I don't know that that's done anymore.
Yeah.
But
it's the first I've heard of it, I'll say that.
Yeah. And I really liked it. It was just a lot of fun. I I like playing the guitar, obviously, but I liked that my students wanted to learn.
Right.
And that was something I took for granted. But at least the students I had there, they just wanted to play guitar. And I could appreciate that because I always just wanted to play at all costs, you know.
Now, before we get into the more of the teaching stuff, I actually want to go back a little bit, just as when you were back at Berklee, you know, because you said that was really the first time you were a student, right? You didn't have any formal lessons and stuff. What was that experience like, and how were your teachers, you know, teaching the creative arts and then all the music stuff?
I mean, I don't want to mention any names because they sometimes follow the things that I do. But I have...
well, maybe you could do a more general... How was your overall experience with being taught, coming from the self-taught world where, you know...
I went in there with an open mind. I was just going to learn anything anybody taught me. I didn't care what it was or if I liked it or not. I wanted to know everything. Yeah. You know? So that
seems like a great attitude to have going into college.
I think that was most people's attitude. I mean, I say a lot of that. I've said most of the same thing about Berklee. Everybody did that. I mean,
really? I feel like I could.
There were some people who didn't, but a majority of people were just like open books. They were like, "Give me everything, and I will just remember it." Yeah, it was truly that. And if you didn't have that mentality,
you weren't there for very long.
You weren't there for very long.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, there was. This sort of unwritten weeding out process I think a lot of people went through, you know. It was really hard, you know, and it was crazy the schedules you kept to do it, but then the ones who really did it at a high level did it at a very high level, you know, and I wanted to be that, and I think a lot of people wanted to be that. So as far as teachers go, thinking back, you know, probably a lot of them weren't great communicators. It was more I learned from the books, you know. I learned from reading and doing the exercises, just sort of how I always learned. But there were a couple, you know, there's some teachers now, like I still keep in contact today.
You're still in touch with a lot of them?
A couple of them. Yeah. We do things together. I speak, you know, at least once a month, if not more. I still see them in the streets sometimes, you know.
That's great.
Yeah. But I don't even know how many teachers I had. Just there were a couple who kind of got it. But they were the ones who...
Some that you clicked with, some you didn't.
But they really put me through the ringer, you know?
Okay.
And I had a couple teachers, I won't name names, who, you know, were just rough for the sake of, you know, this is what I had to do, so this is what you have to do.
I'm going to make you suffer the same way I did.
And, you know, most people could pick up on that. But I had a couple teachers who were tough on me, you know, because I thought they didn't like me, but it ended up because, you know, they really, you know, appreciated what I was good at, you know, and... Later in life, I realized, you know, they were really trying to push me to do better, you know, and that was not always the case, I think, with some teachers.
Sure.
They were just rough to be rough, as opposed to the ones who were rough because they really wanted to see you excel at something.
Right.
You know?
And I'm really interested, too, specifically with your experience, because, again, it seems like such an unconventional path. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say totally unconventional, because I know there's a lot of famous self-taught musicians out there that were very successful, but... You know, a lot of people, on the other hand, myself included, went through private lessons for years and years and years and years, and then, you know, went to college for music. And it's like, okay, it's obviously a level up and it's a step up, and it's a lot more difficult and more challenging, but it's also kind of, all right, this is my comfort zone in a way. I'm used to this. For you, you know, you didn't have any of that until, what, you were 22, 23? So I'm just curious to hear, you know, I guess, was it weird having, okay, now someone's telling me what to do instead of I'm gonna go find it out, because it seems like you're the kind of person that wants to go out like, I'm gonna figure it out, I'm gonna go to the library, I'm gonna get the books. And now it's a little bit different where it's someone telling you to do it, even though you still want to do it and it's still something you're passionate about. Was it, I guess, just what was that like? Was it a big change, or was it like, no, this is great, I love it, feed me more information?
Yeah, it was basically just that.
Yeah, okay. So it wasn't as big of a change.
I went in there with an open mind. I just said, if this is what you're telling me is important, then this is what I'm going to learn, because everybody else is learning it, and I didn't know the difference. I mean, at that point, I couldn't have even cared less what it was. Yeah. As long as it was something that I didn't already know, I was going to practice it. I was going to learn how to play it, and I was going to talk to people about it, you know? Yeah.
Cool. I was just curious from that perspective. All right, I got one or two more questions before we wrap this up. When you were at college for music, did you ever get any advice on how to make a living as a musician, whether it was from the teachers or maybe fellow classmates? Was there ever any talk about like, well, hey, this is a good idea, you should do this? Any career advice, I guess? Or was that really like everyone was kind of in the same boat?
I mean, I hate to say no, but no, not really. I mean, it was pretty much assumed, you were going to do, as a musician, you were going to do one of three things. You were going to perform, which the majority of people wanted to do.
Right.
You were going to write or compose something, or you were going to produce something. And there might have been a little bit of the business aspect to it, but that was, that was not a lot of people.
Right.
I mean, everybody kind of absorbed the business stuff to apply to their own thing,
Okay. When you say absorb the business stuff, where were they absorbing that from?
You mean like where were they getting all that information from?
Well, yeah. If it wasn't really talked about, where were they pulling that from?
Well, there were classes that you could take.
There were, okay.
Oh yeah, there were music business
classes.
classes.
There was some help.
But it was purely focused on the business of the music business,
Okay.
And remember, this was 2006, 2007. The music business drastically changed at the end of 2008, 2009.
Right.
And all that stuff you learned all of a sudden started to become less relevant because all of a sudden, record labels are not as big as they used to be,
right.
and touring and, playing with people is not as niche or lucrative as it
right.
used to be, all of a sudden things started opening up and, the internet really changed the way a lot of that is done. But at least those business things were not as important anymore.
Interesting. I was going to say, are the things that you absorbed, is a lot of it irrelevant now in 2019? Or are there still things that still apply?
I would say the business experience I got from running the band is probably, looking
the best
back,
experience.
It was the best experience because I was working with personalities. That was something that sort of at least gave me a starting point for, running a business, of a real business. Not that wasn't a real business, but just working with people on a professional level and having expectations and
right. And you're really doing it. There's a lot to be said about what you learn in the classroom is one thing, but actually going out and doing it is something else entirely.
Yeah, it was something that I think just came really easy to me, or at least
what did the business side of it?
Yeah, just the mindset of being a business person.
Okay.
Right. It's
you say you're a practical person too.
I'm going to do this, right. Very entrepreneurial. Arts is very entrepreneurial anyway. That's my company standpoint anyway, is that we need more artists to actually think like entrepreneurs, not think of yourselves as just like an, entrepreneur who is also an artist.
Right.
It's like, think about
tied in together.
Yeah. Solve problems with what you do. That's what my business is all about. It's very much you have this very impressive skill set, and I could talk days and days about the artist's skill set versus the engineer or the doctor or anything like that, and I could make that case, I think, for a lot of people, that it's a very impressive skill set when you look at the amount of work that you put into it, but then nobody really ever does anything with it,
right.
And I was always,
but they're not sure what to do with it.
Yeah, they're not sure what to do, and I think I looked at that and I said, well, that's not really, I was seeing a lot of that, and that was not something that
was a common thing.
Yeah, just among creative types, and
right.
I was very go get it. So when the opportunity presented itself, that I might be able to do something that I could use my skill set and solve a problem, and it might help other people solve their problems, and that's where Creative Peaks comes from.
Right. I was going to say, you kind of took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to ask you. I was like, all right, how did the idea for this company, Creative Peaks, come about?
It's very much. I was, my business career has taken me down a lot of roads in terms of educational content and trainings, and I've traveled a lot, and I've been to a lot of schools, and, seeing other locations and sort of the troubles they have with, working with artists, and, I don't know if a lot of people realize, but now I think more than ever, just arts education, just branch all the arts, the dance, the music, the drawing and painting and all that. It is probably more in demand now than I think it's ever been. But
what do you think that is? Do you think the internet has something to do with that?
No, I think it has a lot to do with just sort of the common direction of, like school district curriculum. Everybody's sort of evolved into this sort of, what do they call it, STEM, approach, not necessarily STEM, that's getting more and more specific, but it's just the technology focused, mathematics focused, that type of thing. And there are certainly initiatives that are trying to bring arts into it. But, arts is one of those things, in my opinion, it's just best experienced separately, because there's just things that you get from studying an art that you don't necessarily get from studying everything else, right? And it's
unique experience.
Yeah, and I just saw that a lot of people, a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, and I would say a lot of people I've worked with over the past 7-8 years, I would call them artists because they were always trying to be creative,
right?
But they needed a lot of help, those basic communication things. How do I sit in a room with 6 other people and actually get them to do something that I want them to do? That's
productive and successful.
Yeah, and learn something and feel really good about it and understand the values that I bring to it are really important. Those were things that everybody needed help with. That was mostly what my job was. And there were just not that many people who were interested in recognizing the problem. There were a lot of people.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I have ideas,
Sure.
maybe like pipe theories, but I think it just has a lot to do with, the values that people place on, arts and what it is that we do sort of got lost along the way for whatever reason. You can blame the internet, you can blame, bad teachers, you can blame whatever, but somewhere along the lines, people stopped wanting to pay for really good artistic content, whatever that might be, performing or teaching or anything, right?
Well, I even think of like streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music and stuff like that.
It's a shame.
Do you think that has a role to play in why that's been happening and people are undervaluing art? Because you don't have to pay for an album, you can just put it on.
Look how hard it is to actually make money performing or writing music.
Right.
It shouldn't be that hard. I mean, it should be hard. Don't get me wrong.
You should have to work for it, is what you're saying.
But you shouldn't have to feel like you're selling your soul.
Right.
And I think when I look back at all of my colleagues who didn't want to teach, they saw it as maybe a little bit of selling your soul, because you were giving up on that thing that you really wanted to do.
Like giving up on the dream.
To sort of just sit in a room and work with a kid who may or may not want to be there.
Right.
But my perspective now, looking back on that, is very much, I can make the person want to be there. And I think if you as a person knew that you could actually make anybody want to do it, if you just knew how to reach them that way, with your skill set, you would really want to teach, because that's really where that's the most lucrative business I've ever been a part of.
Teaching specifically.
Yeah, but good education. Yeah, I know that's going to be that's pretty surprising to a lot of people, but. And I'm not talking about working in, bougie neighborhoods who charge $100 an hour or anything like that. I'm talking where when you do something and let's say you're part of a program or something, if you have the opportunity to change people's perspective on what it is that you do, through your skill set.
And change their perspective on the arts.
Yeah, it will change their perspective on that. And, that's what Creative Peaks is all about. It's that we have the skill set as artists that, we really have to learn how to monetize outside of those main sort of, I'm going to perform with it, I'm going to create it, or, I'm going to produce it for somebody else. Once you get away from that, you're sort of left with the business aspect of whatever it is that you do and teaching. And teaching is one of those things, especially I'll just speak as a guitarist at this point. It's one of those things that's overexplored and underexplored at the same time. There's so many people who do a mediocre job at a very high level, and I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that it's not a real
like the musicianship is a high level, but the teaching quality is
very
mediocre.
low, because there's sort of this understanding, I think, about guitars, and topic for another day, is just kind of like a casual thing.
Sure.
And that, I was always fighting the current of, well, it's not a serious instrument. You can't really learn serious skill, And
you ran into that? People saying that about guitar?
every day.
You're
It didn't matter
That's your
where I
life?
was,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you a funny story. I was in Chicago and I was working with this new teacher. And just as we were doing the workshop, the class I was doing for them, a customer walked in. It was like in the middle of summer. They were closed for the summer.
Okay.
And he was looking for music lessons for his son. And the dad said, I'm looking for lessons for my kid. And, I see this guy over here. He's playing guitar. He looks like the teacher I want. And the school owner's like, well, he doesn't work here. He's just, he's working with our teacher to train them.
Mm-hmm.
And the dad goes, well, what can this guy do? So he walked in and he asked the teacher in front of me, he goes, can you just play for my kid? And, the guy was like nervous. He didn't know what to do. So,
oh boy.
So he
putting him on the spot.
He put him on the spot, and he crashed and burned. And then kid, I had to jump. I jumped right in, and I started. I just started improvising this thing, and the kid was like, "Oh my god!"
What did the other guy
and I
play?
go, I'm gonna show him that right now. He'll teach you how to do that. And the kid's like, "Sign me up, Dad." Dad's like, "You really gonna teach my kid that?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll teach your kid that."
Wow. There you go. You sold
I'll sign
it to
up,
him. Yeah.
Something like that is kind of, not many people have that experience, but it's like you had to give them some idea of what the value could be.
Right. And the other teacher just wasn't.
That teacher just didn't understand that. And that's obviously just one story, but that's one of, many stories
I've
come across where, when you
probably a very common tale.
It's super common. And when you put an artist on the spot like that and they haven't thought about that, how am I going to use that skill to actually, get people to
show people that it's a worthwhile skill to learn and cultivate.
We don't really spend a lot of at least I didn't spend a lot of time doing that. It was always more so about me.
Right,
and then eventually about us.
Right. You're not thinking of how it looks to the rest of the world.
It was me-centered,
Right.
And, once you really start reflecting on, well, how does it affect other people? And, this business of being an artist is very sort of, sad, I think is probably the right word. It's, you really got to do one thing nowadays to get any exposure. And then at that point, you're really more of an advertiser and marketer than you are an artist, And we were very disappointed with where things were going, and we see that this lack of value is something that's persistent across everywhere we've been in the country. It does not matter if it's a high class neighborhood.
You've seen it in a lot of different locations all over the.
Dozens
country.
and dozens. And it was finally, I think the straw that broke the camel's back was, we just couldn't find any willing participants in our programs.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about Creative Peaks here. I'm talking about just my previous occupation as a music teacher. And nobody was really willing to do it because they were so focused on other things. And, there's this whole professionalism aspect to it that I think was very sort of systemic, just the way that you learn music and the way that I learned. It doesn't really prepare you for that professional career. Yeah. Like the one, I'm not talking about the one where you're in on the record label and you're doing good. You can do whatever you want because you got the chops. That doesn't happen for pretty much 99% of everybody. But I'm talking about the real sort of working in the real world and, grinding
it out.
and really, trying to make a name for yourself, Those are not the real things you learn. We learned all the flashy stuff and the business. We heard all the stories and
and music theory and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's like I said before, Berklee was the best thing and then the worst thing, and then eventually became the best thing because now I'm looking at it all these years later with a fresh set of eyes, and I'm
new
seeing,
perspective.
All those things that we got back there were really not the things that we needed to hear. And I'm saying that because, everybody that I've associated myself with over this past 15 years will tell you the same thing, that, it was cool, but it was either bad timing or the things that we learned really didn't help.
Yeah.
It was the atmosphere helped. But the skill set didn't. So, just to talk about it a little bit, what Creative Peaks does is...
that's what I was going to ask. How does this tie in to your mission with Creative Peaks?
Creative Peaks provides that sort of skill set for the artistic individual. We are very education focused right now because we think, there is a value problem just in the United States, right? And
a value problem with arts specifically.
Just and when I say value, I mean the appreciation that it brings to you as maybe a parent, and what it's worth to the person who's paying for it.
Right.
It's
what am I getting out of this, or what is my child?
Yeah, and am I willing to pay for it?
Right.
So there's this value issue, but then there's also this issue with artists not being able to start a career,
right,
let alone sustain a career.
Right.
So teaching is that thing that is so in demand, but it's so hard to find a good music teacher or an arts teacher or just somebody who can teach your kid a creative skill at a high level. So what we do at Creative Peaks is we provide them with that skill set. Like, how do you communicate drawing to somebody who maybe doesn't have any interest or is interested but doesn't know what to do? Like,
or where to start.
How do you teach somebody how to sit down in a voice lesson and understand what it is you're about to do? And I'm not a singer, but I work with singers.
Right.
How do you sit down at a piano and teach 12 people the same thing, and make sure they all walk away with knowing what to do and what they learned and why they learned it. There's a real importance to being clear and having... we talk a lot about clarity in our instructions, and that you just have to find a way to effectively communicate what it is that you do. And I think that was the hardest thing for me. That was the hardest thing for a lot of my colleagues. It's the hardest thing, I think, now. You're shaking your head. Yes. It's really hard to tell somebody, forget age. It's just really hard to tell somebody, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And this is what you're going to learn from it.
Right. This is what you're going to take away from it.
And I think, as a musician, I look at how you teach people or how people have traditionally learned. And it's pretty much, hey, we're going to do this book. Yeah. This is what I did, so this is what we're going to do. You want to learn the song? All right, I'll show you how to do the song. We'll do it for 6 months. And, parents will look at that, or we refer to them as customers because that's what they are. But your customers will look at that and say, oh, he's just doing whatever. That's not really worth that much to me. Yeah. And then they move on to the next person and the next person, and this is eventually just something we found out is persistent through all arts. But they just
that's what I was going to say. Just to clarify for the listeners here, this is not just for music Creative Peaks, right? This is for
it's not even.
Field?
We don't even. It's really what we do is focused on just teaching. Right. And if you really want to break apart, it's not necessarily what to teach, though we are working on things where we can provide
suggestions,
curricula for teaching.
Oh, that's great.
But more so, it is how do you communicate the things that you want to teach. Right. Artists sometimes just want to teach what they like. Right. And you should be able to do that. But how do you effectively communicate that to get some sense of clarity and continuity and all those things that are important to curriculum? But then also, how do you put a curriculum together? How do you put together a program that people will buy into and be willing to see? How do you build this type of value in your community so that people will want to participate, or they will be willing to pay for something like this? Music and arts doesn't have to be this sort of high class thing that there's sort of a stigma, I think, about it.
Sure,
definitely. But it can't be this thing where there's a lot of hope attached to, where it's like, well, I hope they do it and something sticks, and there's definitely
the parents just kind of throw the kids into the lessons, like hope for the best.
We've all had those. Yeah, we've all had those.
Well, that's why I say, because I feel like that's kind of the stereotypical. Like if I had $1 for every time I ran into someone who said, oh yeah, my mom made me take piano for 3 years and I stopped it. But at the same time,
there's a lot of those stories.
Yeah, there is. And at the same time, I meet a lot of people, a lot of parents of kids who quit, and they say, yeah, I wish I could keep going, and I wish I didn't give it up. And so there's a little bit of that. I did it, and then I gave up, and I regret not going back to it, which is never too late. But a lot of parents kind of see it when they're they have kids and they're settled down. It's like, it's too late for me. And
Yeah.
that's a shame, because you can see they know there's a value there. They can sense it, and they know there's something to get out of there, but maybe at the time their teacher didn't know how to communicate that value. And that's what you guys are trying to do, basically,
That's the overwhelming
right?
results we've gotten back just with talking with, hundreds of families, I think at this point, maybe even 1,000 families, is that's generally the thing, that it's hard to find a good teacher. And
parents don't always know what makes a good teacher.
No, they don't.
Up front.
And also now more so, the past few years, like learning arts has become this thing where, people really want to do it because it's really trying to.
Well, the science is there too, that the arts have such benefits to your life.
We as artists are not being taught how to
communicate that benefit,
how to work with that, and that's exactly what Creative Peaks is filling. Is that's
great.
There is a way to teach a lesson and provide this sort of extra benefit that parents are looking for, whether it's and we're, I don't want to throw out something fancy like the executive functions, but that is the type of thing, multitasking and concentration.
So you guys have really broken it down in your curriculum.
Yeah, and that's what we say to people, that you hear that it's hard to be a good teacher, and it's our experience is really much it's hard work, but it's not hard to learn how to be a good teacher, and that's the thing I want people to really understand, is that teaching it cannot be this thing where, I'm just going to do it because I can't do something else. And I think, my experience as a musician says there's so many people who do that that's just my opinion. That's the reason that there's no value on what it is that I was doing, is that there's so many people willing to do it, for short money, bottom of the barrel, not really trying.
Yeah. And
that makes me look bad.
Yeah.
And
it creates a stereotype and a stigma.
Exactly.
Yeah, the music teachers, whatever.
That's exactly it. And
They're
I don't think
serious.
that's really fair to the people that I've met and the people I've worked with, the ones who work really hard. We're all sort of fighting this current of, this is
people making you look bad.
Like. Well, that's essentially it, you know, and I don't...
Not to be blunt about it, but...
Well, it's the truth, though.
Yeah.
It's that, there's a lot of people who work hard on it. Maybe there's a lot of people who work hard and don't really know how to do it,
Right.
And you can learn that, very easily. But there are still just some people who see it as a way to make a quick buck. And I think being an artist right now, you really can't afford to have that mindset, because the more you do, the less likely you are to have career options later on down the road. And I think that's our long-term focus. I mean, it's something we talk about a lot in our meetings, is that, right now, all that we can do is what we're doing. We're trying to pass on these, strong values through the arts and helping artists develop more professionally relevant skills. But ultimately, it has to open up into this thing where you have career paths that can still be focused on performing or all the other things that you want to do. But you don't have to think of it as this all or nothing proposition. Like, my heart's on cruise control and this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
Teaching was that thing. I came to it sort of at the end of my quote unquote performing career, but it's something that gave me a massive amount of perspective, that if I could have the time, to perform, that I would relish the opportunity, and maybe one day I will do it. But teaching gives you an immense amount of perspective on your skill, and it's made me a better musician. It's made me obviously a better person, made me, I hope, a good father. It's something that
helps with a lot of
it's
aspects
given me a
massive
understanding. And I think if you take some time to get to know the people we worked with in Creative Peaks, they would tell you the same thing, that when you really focus in on your teaching, it is not this thing that has to consume your life, or sort of, I use the terms, steals your soul or sells your soul. It's this thing that sort of, it flows with what it is that you do as an artist, as a person. And that's what we're trying to pass on, is that there is a more artistic way and professional way to teach. Some of it is common sense. Some of it is more understanding the creative process. We do a lot of work with people on sort of understanding where that creative aspect comes from, and why you have to teach it a different way. And not really teaching creativity, but just sort of putting people in that mindset of how do I be creative? I don't think that creativity is something that you can teach. I think creativity is something that you have to sort of push people into. We say inspire the creative spirit, because that's really all that you can do. You can push people to be creative. You can put them in the situations to create.
Set them up for it.
But you can't make them be good creators. And a lot of people would agree with that. I think a lot of the expectations going into, a business arrangement in education is more so we want our, child to create. I want to be able to do this. I want to write a song. I want to do that. And it's like, okay, well, I can show you some of those skills, but that does not mean you're going to use it. You have to think about teaching it in.
Well, it's like that old adage, I can show you the door, but you have to walk through.
Kind of, yeah. That's pretty good. Is that from The
I
Matrix?
feel like Neo, or no, what's his name? Morpheus said that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's an older adage than The Matrix, but that's the first thing that popped into my head.
Yeah. But that's probably accurate. It's more so.
You're setting them up for success.
You can have high expectations.
Yeah.
But you have to change what those expectations are. And if you can make those adjustments and you can communicate what it is that you do on a very effective level, you can be very successful doing that, and you will still be able to do the things that you want to do. And that's definitely the thing that I want people to understand, is like, we are trying to do all these things in the arts, but even if you don't want to participate in our programs, that's okay. But just understand that there is a more productive and a more sort of copacetic way of doing things as an artist that will provide a lot of career opportunity down the road. And I think if anybody pays any attention, that you really need to do that, not so much for me or you, but for the people who want to do that after, because we have very few career choices. And
we being
just artists in general, it's more popular to be an artist now than ever. Yeah. And what does that even mean anymore? I mean, that's something we talk about a lot, is
how do you define an artist?
How do you define an artist nowadays, And even now there are more ways to express yourself as an artist that don't even fall into the conventional mediums, Well,
art is always changing and evolving, right?
Well, that's the point.
Right. That's the whole point of it.
But right now it's sort of hazy into where you draw that line, saying, I'm an artist and this is what I do.
Right.
And I don't think teaching has ever been truly understood as the art form behind what drives the arts.
Right. A lot of people would think of teaching as arts.
It wasn't always that way. It sure as heck wasn't always that way. But it is that way now.
We were talking before the podcast about how, plenty of famous musicians and artists, visual artists or dancers, but how many famous teachers do you know?
Yeah, and I think when I said that, I was referring to, I don't want to hear about that famous, Russian piano teacher who 5 people studied with and became performers. That person probably was not a good teacher. They were just sort of a,
right place,
overwhelming
right time,
figure, maybe right place, right time, or
they had the right connections too.
Could have been, I'm talking about where's that person who really walked in and took control of the room and made a difference in the community.
Right.
That's something that
you don't hear about those people as much. They don't get the credit they deserve. Probably
you don't necessarily need to hear about those people, but I think in other forms of education, the public school sort of curriculum, you'll hear about them more often than not.
Right.
But
the creative teachers don't tend to get as much.
Exactly. Yeah. Because what do they?
That's
really
interesting
do?
too, because those were always my favorite teachers. No offense to the other teachers, but
I never really had many. But I think that's
all the creatives. Maybe that's just me personally, but like all the arts and obviously the music teachers and stuff. That was, or anytime we could do something creative in school. Sometimes like creative writing or something like that in English class. Yeah. So those were always my favorite teachers because you could do that.
That's not really something I can say. I never really had any.
Right. Yeah.
That is something I always think about though, and that
again, it's amazing that you turned out as a musician and a creative.
Yeah, I guess
because of that.
I think it was more so just tunnel vision. I wanted to do it.
Right. You had that goal in mind from very early on.
That's not something I try to pass on though. That is not. As a
you
teacher,
wouldn't want anyone
because I don't want people to do what I did, and I'm not talking about how I learned. Obviously I'm working with people who are learning in a much different way than I learned.
Sure.
But I could have learned a lot better. I mean, I didn't have a lot of options back then anyway.
Right, you did the best with what you had to some extent.
But I think if I want someone to learn after all my years of experience, I just want people to learn fun. I want them to enjoy it, you know,
Yeah.
and I don't want people to feel overwhelmed by this idea of doing another thing, whether they're 7 years old or 17 years old, you know, or 70.
Yeah.
It should just be this thing that can easily integrate into their life. And if it can't, or if it's not, then I view that as my problem, because it should never be this thing that, you know, inconveniences you, especially when you're paying money for it. But, you know, that line is sometimes hazy too, but more so I want everybody to have a good experience, because I didn't really have any experience, you know? So that's really important for me.
That sounds great. Well, it sounds like you guys have a great thing going there. I'm really looking forward to keeping up to date with what Creative Peaks is doing here.
I'm just glad that somebody was willing to take on this challenge of really understanding what it is about the arts that is, you know, interesting and saddening and maddening.
It's a drama, man.
It really
it's a
is.
Shakespeare play in life.
Obviously, I wouldn't have done it any other way, but you know, that doesn't mean that it can't be changed later on. And you know, I think it's a good thing what you want to do, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it. There you go. And just so for people listening who want to find out more about Creative Peaks, although you just gave us quite a lot to think about here.
So,
where can we find your stuff online?
We operate at www.creativepeaks.org.
Okay.
We offer a slew of sort of professional development courses that we work in periodically throughout the year. So we never really take on more than what we can handle. But we're always open to talk, and you can go to our website and reach out to us. And if you have any questions,
if people want to get in touch with you, they just go right on the website.
Go right on the website. There's many opportunities to get in touch, and
awesome.
You know, we look forward to hearing from you. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, out there, and we're just looking to spread the wealth in a lot of ways.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, Tony. This has been the Arts Unknown podcast. Our guest today was Tony Rizzotto. Thanks so much, Tony, for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. And my name is Jared Rocco. I'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for listening. All right, that does it for today's episode of the Arts Unknown podcast. I'd like to say a special thank you to my guest today, Tony Rizzotto, and a thank you to his company, Creative Peaks, for sponsoring this episode. If you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Arts Unknown podcast, consider subscribing to us on Google Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Jared Rocco, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening.